Hi, I'm Tim Wimber. When Martin asked me to talk about legacy, the first thing I thought about was the idea that everybody gets to play. Early on, when God was speaking to my father and talking about starting a church, he didn't really believe everything we were doing. We were just from a nice evangelical church. And we had a very limited experience in anything supernatural. Although things always seemed to happen because my parents prayed. You know, money would come in when we needed it. God always provided. But we had a very dispensational view of all things God. So when things started changing and people started getting healed, my parents had the conversation and they said, well, what should we do now? Should we get a tent and start a revival meeting or should we just give it away? And because we were who we were evangelicals, we were Christians, we decided to just give it away. So when we get saved, we get this whole package. We have no choice. Supernatural abilities are every Christian's right. We are representatives of God. God doesn't care if we want it or not. We could do it if we wanted to. And remember too, this whole thing of doing supernatural things, it isn't a merit-based system. It isn't because of great learning or this isn't witchcraft. It's not incantations. It's following God. It's doing what He's doing. When my daughter was 18 months old, she was in the nursery, and because we always prayed for owies, she saw a boy with a cast on his arm and went and prayed for his owie. And when the parents took the kid to the doctor to get his checkup to see how things were going, not only was the arm healed, it had never been broken. Do you think my 18-month-old daughter had enough maturity, had enough understanding of healing, that's the reason why that could happen? No, it had nothing to do with that. I think this was like 2 weeks before she bit some other child in the face. So it wasn't that she had this godly personality. It wasn't that she was so close to God. What it was God doing what God was going to do. And all it takes is somebody to ask. And I think in God's eyes, there's not a whole lot of maturity difference between us and 18-month-olds. I think He sees us all as human beings. I think from the time we're born, we're the same to Him. Remember, it's God, not you. God's the one who heals people. It's not you who heals people. When we ask for something supernatural, it's not us. We don't carry the power. We just know to ask. I think that there's a certain amount of success we have because of practice, but I think it's more just because we just believe to ask more. We experienced more healing early on, but we never felt like it was anything we were doing. We were just excited to see what God was going to do next. When God, in a kind of a rich point with me and God lately, I had a vision. And not because I was praying and asking for anything. I was just kind of spacing out, thinking about what good things God's done. And he took me to a stadium. And it was so real. I was standing on the stage and I could feel the instruments behind me. And they're singing that song, where you go, I'll go. What you say, I'll say. What you pray, I'll pray. Jesus could only do what He saw you do. And then I was gone. I was back in where I was sitting, staring up at the ceiling. And it let me know that wouldn't have happened 25 years ago. 25 years ago, there weren't enough people to fill a stadium to sing that song. I think there were probably 80,000 people singing that song. Now, what is it that they know? What they know is that Jesus was our example. Jesus did things because he had such good communication with God. He was so close to God. He knew exactly what God was doing. He could see it happening. He could go from place to place and he could heal people and see their demons and free them and knew their hearts. What we have is the ability to do what Jesus did. But remember, Jesus didn't heal everybody he saw. Otherwise, when Peter and John were walking to the gate beautiful in the book of Acts, that person wasn't healed. And you know that Jesus had to walk by him a few times. In Corinthians, we hear that, God, the Spirit, gives various gifts. To one, he gives it. Well, it isn't. It's not like you get something to keep. We've got to teach people. We've got to show people that God will do whatever you need at the time. My dad used to talk about that we all go to the job with an empty toolbox and reach in and find the tool that we need. Not that we brought it with us. God supplies it at the time. If we can implant that into people, what will this world be? We will be God's representatives. We already know that it has nothing to do with our maturity. It has nothing to do with our dedication or anything. We just have to try. This is not a merit-based system. We need all Christians to experience this. This isn't that we get to, we want to. We need this. This is where it's going to be. A while back, I saw a vision, and it represented that there has to be people to take in the harvest. There has to be. And all these people had seen God. All these people had known God, but they didn't want to play unless it was real. Unless they got to see God move again. They'd seen revival and they wanted to see it again. We have to make place for these people. When Sharon and I were young marrieds, we had small groups in our house. And the small groups got bigger and bigger, and at one point we had a group, and it was quite large, and it was just the perfect place to do spiritual gifts. And we had Jill Austin at our house, and we were praying for people, and my wife started singing in tongues over one of the people and it was a lullaby, and we all knew. And Sharon says, "How did you know that it was a lullaby?" Well, it's because we all heard it. We all started repeating back the lines. Well, she said, "I was singing in tongues." We didn't hear it in tongues. We heard English. It was, and why? What was that all about? Did we need that? No. But God did that. And that's the kind of thing that happens. It was just for our edification. It was just for fun. God did that just to show us something, that he's capable of doing this. It has nothing, it wasn't a need. I don't think it changed. I don't think it caused the healing. I don't think it was any way earth-shaking, but it was an experience that I've never forgotten. If we need more people to experience spiritual gifts. We need to experience a whole bunch of different things so that we know what's available. In the Great Commission, Jesus said, "Go make disciples of all nations." It didn't say make converts. It doesn't say get people to come forward. He didn't say let's get decisions. He said make disciples. Well, the Western Church has done really good at reaching out, but we've not raised our children. And this is how you raise your children. You spend time with them. The way I learned how to pray for the sick is I followed somebody around and did what they did. The way I learned how to cast out demons is I watched somebody else cast out demons. The way I learned how to do almost every spiritual gift was watching somebody else did it. I learned words of knowledge and prophecy and everything else by watching other people do it. And part of my heart has always been that in any group we go to is looking for somebody to replace us, looking for our replacements, looking for other leaders, looking to bring other people out. When Jesus, our perfect example, sent out the 72 in Luke 10, what was his experience? His experience says, I saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. He was very excited. If this is what I think, Jesus thought the same thing. He wanted his people to know how to do this stuff. He wanted his people to be able to do the supernatural things that he did. And we need to try to give it away as fast as possible. A lot of people would have liked to had my dad pray for them. But he knew better. My dad knew that they could do it just like he could. I remember I was the person videotaping a conference. That was my job. And he brought up two boys that were probably 11 or 12 and had him pray for a man with a bad leg. And, because I was videotaping it, I could hear everything over the microphones and everything. And these were typical junior high kids. Ooh, gross, but the person got healed. Was it their great faith? No. Was it my dad's faith? Well, maybe, but what it really was just God. And it was to show that it had nothing to do with maturity. It had everything to do with trusting God to work through these people. We may need to try to take people off of pedestals that are gifted. We need to bring them back down and let them be gifted, but let them be human at the same time, and let them get help when they need it, and let them be able to say they need help when they need it. But we have to let everybody do all the things and not keep any of it separate from them. This is not we may think we'll do it better, but we need to give it away as fast as possible, because the more people that do it, the more ministry will happen, the more anything. It's like the law of reciprocity. The more you give away, the more you get. Over and over and over again. We as leaders of the church, of the vineyard, need to give it away as fast as we can. And then we'll get more. We'll get more ministry, more people to minister to, more converts, more everything. That's the thing that's going to change the future of the vineyard, and that's what we need to leave as a legacy to the vineyard. the idea of everybody gets to do the supernatural stuff. When I was young, we lived on a street, and the people at the end of the street were Pentecostals. And my parents, having been nice dispensational evangelicals, thought that they were off the deep end, but they were having a vacation Bible school. So they invited all the kids on the block, and they took them all to this vacation Bible school. And the Holy Spirit fell with the kids. And my parents flipped out. And I remember thinking, well, you know what? It seemed like God. But I'll believe my parents because, I was 10. And later on, because of that, and because every time my dad would sing out in tongues, I'd get angry. And I'd want to yell or, I don't cuss, so I can't. But I'd want to yell and I just wasn't happy about it. And it was a reaction. I had no control over it. And I really didn't like it. But then I thought, okay, I know I'm a Christian. I was 17. This would the very earliest times when the church was just starting. And I lived in a room in the garage. So it's like, every typical high school boy, I liked living in the garage because it's rough. And so I went into my room. We were having this meeting at the house because all the meetings for the church when it was planting were at my parents' house because who had any money to rent a hall and, so I went in there and I thought, okay, if this is God, I'll be able to do it. And I didn't think I had to do it. So I said, okay, I'll speak in tongues. So I spoke in tongues. I go, okay, I guess it's all right. And that was it. I mean, that was an experience where, the thing that's probably a better story is, at least I think so, is when Sharon and I were first married. Sharon's family's all from around London. So my dad was going to do his first missions trip, and he was taking people. Well, remember, the church was all 20 years old. I mean, nobody was much older than that. I think my grandmother and my mother and my aunt and my dad and my Uncle Bob were the 4 oldest people in the church, and that was it. And my dad was in his 40s at the time. And so we went to England, and because I wanted to go to England, and my wife's family's there, and my wife is probably 8 months pregnant, and so she wants to see her grandma again. So we go a week early, and we're at her grandmother's house, and I know I shouldn't be here because I'm faking it because I don't know any of this supernatural stuff. I can't do any of this stuff. And so somebody said, well, if you really need to be built up spiritually, you need to pray in tongues. So I prayed in tongues the entire time. And it was everything I could do to just not run from this whole experience. And so by the time the team got there, I didn't know what was going to happen. And we ended up going to David Pitch's church in Chorleywood, and we were just rude Californians. We walking on the tops of the pews of this very nice church in the nice suburb of London. And I thought, well, it's all right. I'm not feeling too bad. And there was a certain amount of power when we were praying, but I just thought, well, that's just good because, it must be this person's prayer, that person's prayer. But I really didn't think I had anything to do with it. And so, but I thought, I've got to keep trying. And so we ended up going to David Watson's church in York, England. And this is like northern England, pretty close to Scotland. And so it's quite a train ride. So we had rail passes so we could go anywhere that British Rail went. And so we're there, and I'm still praying because I know any minute now somebody's going to say, what are you doing here? And I shouldn't be part of this. I'm not one of those people. And so I think, well, I've got to try. So my dad was very big on letting people have words of knowledge, calling out and letting anybody. And the point was, he took one from me, so that was about anybody. If anybody knew who I was, it was probably my dad. And he asked, and I gave a word of knowledge that I had 2 words, and it turned into a half a paragraph. And I remember I had talked about a man who had, I thought, broken his shin playing soccer, football. But I just kept going. And I kept giving more and more and more detail. And I never saw anybody respond. And I was so depressed. And I thought, oh, I'm a false prophet. I knew I was faking it the whole time. And so by the time the conference was over and I was standing on the rail platform to go back to London to get on a plane to go home, my mom asked, well, how'd it go? And I'd say, well, everything's fine except for that one word I gave. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I gave that word about the guy that broke his shin from playing soccer. What do you mean? I go, well, he didn't get healed. He wasn't there. It wasn't anybody. He said, oh, no, that guy got totally healed. You just couldn't see him because he was behind the pillar in the church. We were in this really old church that had these huge pillars. And I go, oh. And my mom said something that I've always kind of go by. The thing that bugs you the most is probably the one time you really did get it right. It's always, the devil always chooses your big successes to try to push you away. Tries to get you to not believe something. So that, I think, is probably more apropos. It's all spiritual warfare. The devil doesn't like it when we believe what God says. The devil doesn't like it when we actually operate as if we are God's representatives. We get to bring the power of God to our world.